This message is not arriving by accident, and you are not hearing it by chance. There are moments in God's timeline when heaven presses close to earth, when the spiritual atmosphere shifts, and when divine announcements are released to those who are listening with an open heart. This is one of those moments. Archangel Michael says God is unfolding a shift on January 20th that will break every delay and reverse what was working against you, but only if you choose trust right now. This is not a gentle whisper meant to be ignored. This is a serious, weighty, and urgent revelation. Something has been forming behind the scenes for longer than you realize. While you were waiting, praying, questioning, and even doubting, God was not idle. Heaven has been moving pieces you could not see, confronting resistance you could not identify, and preparing a precise moment when pressure would finally break. January 20th is not just another date on a calendar. In the spiritual realm, it represents a hinge moment, a turning point where what was delayed reaches its appointed release. For some of you, delays have followed you for years. You've watched others move ahead while you remained in place. Doors almost open but close at the last second. Promises felt near but never fully arrived. You questioned whether you missed God, whether you misunderstood His voice, or whether you were simply forgotten. But Archangel Michael says these delays were not random, and they were not signs of abandonment. They were the result of opposition that God has now judged and overridden. What was working against you has been identified, confronted, and is about to be reversed. But the condition is clear. You must choose trust right now. Trust is the key that unlocks this shift. Not later. Not after more confirmation. Not once everything makes sense. Right now. God is asking for a decisive internal alignment. Heaven responds to trust because trust is agreement. When you trust God in uncertainty, you are declaring that His authority outweighs what you see, feel, or fear. And that declaration activates movement in the unseen realm. Archangel Michael is not speaking comfort alone. He is speaking instruction. This is not the hour to hesitate, withdraw, or protect yourself emotionally. This is the hour to lean in, even if your hands are trembling. The shift unfolding on January 20th responds to faith expressed before the breakthrough, not after it. There is urgency in this message because timing matters. Some opportunities are not repeated. Some windows open briefly and close once their purpose is fulfilled. God is not trying to scare you. He is trying to position you. There is a difference. The reason this message carries such intensity is because what is coming requires your cooperation. God will not force trust on you. He invites it. And what you choose in this narrow space of time determines how fully you experience the reversal He is releasing. The delay ends, but the direction of your next season is shaped by your response right now. Archangel Michael reveals that what worked against you did so quietly. It hid behind normal explanations, timing issues, people problems, financial limits, emotional exhaustion. But beneath the surface, there was resistance aimed at wearing you down, hoping you would lower your expectations, soften your prayers, and stop believing for more. That resistance has reached its limit. God has drawn a line. January 20th marks the moment when pressure shifts, when the weight lifts, and when what was stuck begins to move. But this movement requires alignment, and alignment begins with trust. You may feel tired as you hear this. You may feel guarded, saying, "I've trusted before, and nothing happened." God knows that pain. He knows how many times you chose faith and felt disappointed. But this is not a repetition of the past. This is a culmination. What you thought were isolated setbacks were actually forming the conditions for a greater reversal. God allowed the tension to build because what breaks next must break completely. Partial relief was never the goal. Total reversal is. This is why the message is direct. This is why it does not come wrapped in comfort alone. Archangel Michael is sounding an alert. Do not retreat now. Do not shut down emotionally. Do not decide that protection is wiser than faith. Heaven is responding to those who choose trust while the outcome is still unseen. Your trust right now is not symbolic. It is functional. It authorizes movement. It releases angels on assignment. It shifts legal ground in the spiritual realm. There is also reassurance here. You are not behind. You have not failed. You have not been disqualified. The delay did not cancel the promise. It clarified it. And now God is unfolding a shift that does not require you to fight harder, strive more, or prove yourself. It requires one thing: trust. Simple, costly, powerful trust. Trust that God's timing is intentional. Trust that resistance has an expiration date. Trust that January 20th is not random but appointed. As this part closes, understand this clearly. This message matters because it is time-sensitive. What you do with it matters. How you respond internally matters. You are being invited into agreement with a divine reversal already in motion. The delay is breaking. What worked against you is losing ground. And the only question heaven is asking right now is this: will you choose trust before you see the change? Or will you wait until the moment passes? What you have been experiencing was never just a series of unfortunate circumstances. There has been an invisible battle behind your delays, and until now, much of it was hidden from your understanding. You felt the weight, but you could not always identify the source. You sensed resistance, but it wore familiar faces, unexpected obstacles, confusing conversations, slow progress, emotional heaviness that appeared without warning. This is how opposition often operates. Quietly, subtly, through ordinary channels, hoping you will blame yourself, your timing, or even God. But Archangel Michael reveals that what stood in your way was not stronger than you. It was simply strategic. And now that strategy is being dismantled. There were moments when you were closer than you realized. Breakthrough was within reach, yet something intervened at the last moment. A decision changed you. A resource dried up. A relationship shifted. You prayed harder, analyzed deeper, and tried to adjust your approach. But the resistance was not about your effort. It was about your assignment. What God has prepared for you carries weight, and anything with weight attracts pressure before release. The delays were not punishment. They were proof that what you carry matters. The unseen opposition worked to exhaust you emotionally. If it could not stop you outright, it aimed to slow you down, to make waiting feel endless, to convince you that consistency was pointless. It whispered that maybe this was as far as you would go. And there were days when you almost agreed. Days when faith felt heavy, when hope felt fragile, and when continuing felt harder than quitting. But even in those moments, heaven was recording your endurance. Every time you kept going despite discouragement, you were building spiritual momentum that could not be erased. Archangel Michael makes it clear, opposition only had permission to delay, not to destroy. There is a difference. Delay stretches time, but it cannot cancel destiny. And now, the season of stretching has reached its limit. God has reviewed the battle, weighed the resistance, and declared that it has gone far enough. What once slowed you is about to serve as evidence of how thoroughly God can reverse a situation. The very areas that frustrated you will soon testify of His intervention. This is why trust is emphasized so strongly. Trust is not denial of reality. It is alignment with authority. When you trust God, you stop negotiating with fear. You stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. You stop asking permission from past disappointments. God shifts your posture from defense to expectation, and expectation changes the atmosphere around you. That is why the enemy resists trust so fiercely that it knows that once trust is chosen, control is lost. Some of you have been fighting internally more than externally. You smiled on the outside while wrestling with doubt on the inside. You kept your responsibilities moving while your heart asked silent questions. God saw that conflict. He did not reject you for it, but now He is inviting you to release it. A shift unfolding requires clarity of heart. Not perfection, but decision. You do not need all the answers. You need alignment. And alignment begins the moment you decide to trust God more than the narrative that delay tried to write over your life. As this message goes forward, understand that you are not alone in hearing it. There is a remnant awakening, people across different places, backgrounds and seasons who are sensing the same internal nudge. If this message is reaching you and resonating deeply, it is because you are part of that awakening. This is where I ask you to take a simple but powerful step. If this word is speaking to you, engage with it. Like this message so it can reach others who need confirmation. Share it with someone who has been waiting and wondering if God still sees them. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do so now, because what is being released here is meant to strengthen, prepare, and align you for what is ahead. Your engagement is not just digital, it is spiritual agreement. When you participate, you are saying, I receive this word. I align with this timing. I choose trust. And that choice carries weight. It creates connection. It expands reach. And it helps ensure that those who feel isolated in delay realize they are not forgotten. Returning to the heart of this message, the invisible battle behind your delays is losing ground because exposure removes its power. What was hidden thrives in silence, but it weakens when named. God is naming it now, not to glorify opposition, but to mark its end. January 20th stands as a divine checkpoint where resistance is reevaluated and removed. And the removal does not come quietly. It comes with momentum. You may notice shifts before the date arrives. Subtle changes in your thinking. A lightness returning. A renewed sense of expectation. These are signs that alignment is happening. Do not dismiss them. They are indicators that the atmosphere around you is already responding to your decision to trust. And as trust settles, movement follows. This part closes with a reminder: delays were never your identity. They were a season, not a sentence. What stood against you was allowed for a time, but that time is ending. The invisible battle is concluding, and heaven is preparing to show visible results. Your role right now is simple but powerful. Stay aligned, stay expectant, and stay willing to trust even before you see the full reversal unfold. What God is releasing in this season is not random relief. It is a calculated, intentional reversal. Archangel Michael reveals that heaven has a strategy, and that strategy has always been sudden. God does not unwind opposition slowly once its assignment has expired. When He moves decisively. This is why the delays you endured felt prolonged, yet the breakthrough ahead will feel compressed. What took years to resist can be overturned in a moment when God gives the command. The reversal strategy of heaven does not mirror human logic. It overrides it. For a long time, you were asking God when. But God was focused on how. How the reversal would not just bring progress, but also restoration. How it would not only move you forward, but also heal what waiting wounded. God allowed the delay to expose what needed to be corrected, strengthened, or removed before acceleration could occur. The strategy was never to frustrate you, it was to prepare you. And now that preparation has reached its fullness, a divine reversal is different from a breakthrough. A breakthrough opens a door. A reversal changes the direction of an entire situation. What was draining you begins to fuel you. What was closing doors now opens path. What was meant to exhaust you becomes evidence of God's faithfulness. Archangel Michael says this reversal does not come from striving harder, but from yielding deeper. It is activated by alignment, not anxiety. That is why trust remains the central requirement. Trust positions you correctly for reversal to occur without resistance. Many of you assumed the delay meant something was wrong with you. You internalized the waiting. You questioned your worth, your discernment, your obedience. But God never questioned you. Heaven never debated whether you were chosen. The delay was external, not internal. It was not a reflection of your value. It was a reaction to your calling. And now, God is not just removing the delay. He is correcting the record. The reversal strategy includes restoring your confidence, your clarity, and your courage. There is also timing involved that you could not have controlled. Certain alignments required people, systems, and circumstances to shift simultaneously. If God had moved earlier, the reversal would have been incomplete. Pieces would have been missing. But now, everything necessary is converging. January 20th stands as the convergence point, where preparation meets permission. Heaven is not rushing. It is arriving exactly on time. This strategy includes exposing what worked against you so it cannot return. God does not want temporary relief followed by repeated resistance. He wants finality. The reversal is designed to close cycles, not just pause them. Patterns that repeated despite effort will now lose their grip. Situations that drained your energy without resolution will finally resolve. The same God who allowed the delay is the God who guarantees the reversal, and He does not fail to finish what He begins. Emotionally, this season may feel unfamiliar. You became accustomed to managing disappointment, to guarding expectation, to preparing for setbacks. Reversal requires you to unlearn survival and relearn trust. A transition can feel uncomfortable. You may catch yourself waiting for something to go wrong even as things start to shift. But Archangel Michael urges you not to sabotage what God is restoring. Allow yourself to hope again. Hope is not naive. It is obedient in this season. This reversal also repositions you spiritually. You are not returning to where you were before the delay. You are moving into something new. The delay refined you. It sharpened your discernment. It deepened your dependence on God. Those qualities now serve you as protection in the next season. You will recognize misalignment faster. You will choose differently. You will move with wisdom instead of urgency. That is part of the strategy. God's sudden reversals often follow prolonged silence. That silence was not absence. It was concentration. Heaven was focused. And now, movement replaces stillness. What you thought was stagnation was actually containment. God was holding back release until the structure could sustain it. And now it can. As this truth settles, receive it without arguing with your past. Do not let memory talk you out of expectancy. This is a new instruction for a new moment. Archangel Michael says the strategy is already in motion. Your role is not to figure it out, but to stay aligned with it. Trust keeps you aligned. Doubt pulls you out of position. Before this part closes, hear this clearly. The reversal you are stepping into will make sense after it happens, not before. That is how God protects it from interference. What you are asked to do now is remain present, receptive, and trusting. Hold on. What comes next changes everything. Type "I receive the reversal" in the comments if this word aligns with your spirit. Lesson code 914 is now activated. As this revelation of reversal settles into your spirit, hear this invitation as part of the same divine flow. God is using this message to reach souls who are still trapped in delay, still questioning if heaven sees them. I feel led right now to invite you into the sowing that unlocks light for others. Scripture declares that when you cast seed upon the waters, it returns multiplied, and God is speaking that promise over you personally. This is not about supporting a channel. This is about fueling a river that carries hope, truth, and awakening to those who are starving for confirmation. When you give through Super Thanks, membership, or the PayPal link in the description, or the PayPal QR code flashing on screen, you are responding prophetically to what God is doing now. I speak blessing over every seed sown, that what was delayed in your life accelerates with holy speed. Obey this moment. Release the seed. Activate the harvest. There is a reason Archangel Michael is speaking now, and it is not random or symbolic. Heaven does nothing prematurely, and it reveals nothing without purpose. Michael's voice carries authority because his assignment is connected to enforcement, protection, and divine order. When he speaks, it signals that a matter has moved beyond discussion and into execution. This is why this message feels weighty. It is not simply informational, it is declarative. Something has shifted in the courts of heaven, and the results are about to manifest on earth. Archangel Michael is not sent for minor adjustments. He is dispatched when boundaries are being redrawn, when resistance is being confronted, and when God is enforcing what has already been decided. His presence in this message tells you that the season you are entering requires divine defense and clarity. What is being released next will need protection, because not everything that delayed you is finished trying to influence you. But the authority backing the shift is greater than anything that stood against you before. The reason this message could not come earlier is because revelation without readiness can become pressure instead of promise. God waits until the heart is capable of receiving truth without misinterpreting it. Earlier, this message might have increased frustration. Now, it produces alignment. You have matured through the waiting. Your discernment has sharpened. Your dependence on God has deepened. This makes you ready to hear not just encouragement, but instruction. Michael's role here is also to remind you that this is not a passive season. While you are not being asked to fight in your own strength, you are being asked to stand in agreement. Agreement is powerful. In the spiritual realm, agreement creates access. When you agree with fear, fear gains ground. When you agree with doubt, doubt multiplies. But when you agree with God's word, heaven moves with precision. Archangel Michael is calling for agreement now, because the timing demands it. There is also a warning embedded in this message, though it is wrapped in reassurance. The warning is not about danger, it is about distraction. When shifts approach, distractions often increase. Old patterns try to resurface. Familiar discouragements attempt to reclaim space. This is not coincidence. It is resistance reacting to its expiration. Michael's presence signals that heaven is guarding this transition, but you must remain attentive. Do not underestimate the power of focus in this moment. Where your attention goes, your alignment follows. You may notice that this message carries clarity rather than confusion. That is intentional. Confusion does not come from God. When Michael speaks, there is order. He clarifies what matters and removes what doesn't. The simplicity of this instruction, choose trust, is not because the situation is small, but because the solution is direct. Heaven is not complicating this moment. Humans often do that on their own. God is inviting you into simplicity so you can move without hesitation. Another reason Michael is speaking now is because the next phase of your life intersects with others. Your shift is not isolated. It will impact relationships, environments, and assignments beyond you. Protection is needed not just for you, but for what flows through you. Delays often isolate people emotionally. Reversals reconnect them purposefully. God is preparing you to move with discernment so that what He restores is stewarded wisely. There is also healing in this message. Not emotional hype, but deep recalibration. You may feel your internal tension easing as you listen. That is not imagination. It is alignment settling in. When truth meets readiness, peace follows. This peace is not the absence of challenge. It is the presence of authority. You are not being sent forward uncertain or unsupported. You are being covered. Michael's timing also reveals that the spiritual battle has shifted phases. What once required resistance now requires removal. What once pressed now retreats. This does not mean there will never be challenges again, but it does mean the nature of the battle is changing. You are moving from endurance into execution, from holding on into stepping forward, from waiting into responding. This is why discernment matters more than emotion right now. Feelings may fluctuate, but instruction remains stable. Trust is not based on how you feel, it is based on who God is. And God is consistent. Michael's message is consistent with God's character. He prepares, He positions, He protects, and He performs. Your responsibility is to stay aligned through each stage. As this part closes, understand that the reason Archangel Michael is speaking now is because heaven is serious about what comes next. This is not a rehearsal. This is not preparation for something far off. This is alignment for what is unfolding. Let this truth settle without resistance. Let it strengthen you rather than overwhelm you. You are not being rushed. You are being positioned. And heaven is watching how you respond. There is a test unfolding in this season, and most people never realize they are taking it until the moment has passed. Archangel Michael reveals that this is not a test of endurance, intelligence, or even obedience in action. It is a trust test, a quiet one, an internal one, a test that does not announce itself but reveals itself through your thoughts, reactions, and decisions when nothing seems to be happening. You did not sign up for this test knowingly, yet it has been shaping your readiness for what comes next. This trust test did not begin when things became difficult. It began when silence stretched longer than expected, when answers didn't arrive on your timeline, when prayers felt unanswered and direction seemed delayed. In those moments, trust is either strengthened or slowly replaced by control. And control often disguises itself as wisdom, caution, or self-protection. But heaven sees the difference. God is not offended by questions, but He is attentive to where you place your reliance when answers are slow. Many of you responded to delay by trying to manage outcomes. You adjusted expectations. You made backup plans. You lowered your hopes so disappointment wouldn't hurt as much. None of this made you faithless. It made you human. But now, God is asking you to loosen your grip. The trust test you didn't know you were taking is reaching its final phase, and the outcome determines how freely you can move forward when the shift fully manifests. Trust is not passive. It is an active decision to rest your weight on God's character rather than your calculations. During the delay, you may have leaned on logic because it felt safer. Logic offers predictability. Trust requires surrender. and surrender feels risky when you've been disappointed before. But Archangel Michael says the very areas where you felt the most cautious are the areas God wants to restore first. Not because you were wrong to protect yourself, but because protection has an expiration date. This test has revealed where fear tried to settle quietly. Fear didn't always show up loudly. Sometimes it appeared as overthinking. Sometimes as procrastination. Sometimes as emotional numbness. You told yourself you were being patient, but deep down you were bracing for disappointment. God saw that tension. He did not condemn it. He allowed it to surface so it could be addressed before acceleration begins. Acceleration without trust creates instability. God will not release you into something new if it will collapse under the weight of unresolved fear. That is why this test matters. It is not about proving loyalty to God. It is about protecting you. Trust stabilizes the soul. It anchors you when change comes quickly. And change is coming quickly. You may be realizing now that you hesitated in moments when faith invited movement. You delayed decisions. You waited for perfect clarity. You told yourself you were being wise, but part of you was afraid of being disappointed again. That awareness is not meant to shame you. It is meant to free you. Awareness signals readiness. God is not asking you to revisit old failures. He is asking you to choose differently now. The trust test also exposes how much you believe God is good, not just powerful. Many people believe God can do anything, but struggle to believe He will do it for them. Delay often attacks goodness more than power. It whispers that maybe God's blessings are for others, or that you've already received your portion. Archangel Michael dismantles that lie. God's goodness toward you has not diminished. If anything, it has been guarding you from premature release. This test is subtle because it plays out in ordinary moments. How you speak to yourself. How you interpret silence. How you respond when plans don't move forward. These moments accumulate. They shape your inner posture. And posture determines readiness. Right now, God is inviting you to straighten spiritually, to lift your head, relax your shoulders, and stop bracing for impact. The season of impact is ending. The season of movement is beginning. Trust also requires letting go of the need to understand everything. Understanding often comes after obedience, not before. If God explained every detail now, it would overwhelm you. He reveals what you need when you need it. The rest requires trust. This is not ignorance. It is humility. And humility attracts grace. You may feel resistance rising as you hear this. A part of you may say, I've trusted before. That is true. But trust is not a one-time decision. It is a posture that must be renewed. Past trust does not replace present trust. God is not asking you to relive old faith. He is asking you to choose fresh alignment. As this part closes, recognize this moment for what it is. You are not failing a test. You are completing one. The fact that you are aware of it means you are ready to move beyond it. Choose trust not because everything makes sense, but because God has proven Himself faithful across time. His choice clears the path for what is unfolding next. And heaven is watching, not with judgment but with anticipation. January 20th is not simply a date you pass through. It is a line drawn by God Himself. Archangel Michael describes it as a spiritual boundary, a moment where one season ends and another begins with authority. Lines in the spirit are not visible, but they are powerful. When God draws a line, it marks separation, decision, and direction. What crosses over changes. What remains behind no longer has permission to follow. This is why this date carries such weight. It is not symbolic. He is decisive. Up until now, you have been standing in overlap. 1 foot in the old, 1 foot in the new. You felt the tension of transition without the clarity of arrival. A tension was not meant to last forever. January 20th represents the moment when indecision loses its grip. Heaven is not asking you to straddle seasons anymore. God is asking you to step forward fully, without dragging yesterday's fears into tomorrow's assignment. A line in the sand forces a choice. Not a dramatic one on the outside, but a real one on the inside. Will you continue to interpret your future through the lens of past delays? Or will you allow God to redefine what is possible for you now? Crossing this line requires release. You cannot carry everything with you. Some mindsets, expectations, and emotional habits belong to the previous season. They served a purpose once, but they are not equipped for what comes next. Archangel Michael makes it clear that this date separates those who are ready to move from those who prefer to remain familiar with delay. Familiarity can feel safer than faith. Delay, though painful, becomes predictable over time. You learned how to function within it. You learned how to survive. But survival is not the same as alignment. God did not preserve you just to keep you functioning. He preserved you to move you forward. There is a cost associated with crossing this line, but it is not loss. It is release. Releasing the need to fully understand. Releasing the habit of self-protection. Releasing the assumption that things must unfold slowly because they always have. God is not bound by your history. He honors it, but He is not limited by it. January 20th marks the moment where history stops dictating what happens next. For some, this line in the sand will feel like relief. For others, it may feel unsettling. Change often does. But discomfort does not mean danger. It often means movement. God is not removing your stability. He is relocating it. Instead of anchoring your peace in predictability, He is anchoring it in trust. That is a stronger foundation. There is also urgency here, but not pressure. Pressure comes from fear. Urgency comes from opportunity. Heaven is alert because timing matters. Windows do not stay open indefinitely, not because God is impatient, but because seasons serve specific purposes. This season of crossing is meant to reposition you quickly. Prolonged hesitation can blur clarity. That is why this instruction is clear and direct. You may feel an internal resistance to fully crossing over. That resistance is not rebellion. It is residue. Residue from disappointment, unmet expectations, and emotional fatigue. God is not asking you to deny that residue. He is asking you not to let it lead. Acknowledge it, then move anyway. Faith does not wait for fear to disappear. It moves in obedience despite it. Crossing this line also changes how you see yourself. You are no longer someone waiting for permission. You are someone responding to instruction. That shift in identity matters. It changes how you pray. It changes how you decide. It changes how you respond when obstacles appear. You stop asking, "Why is this happening?" and start declaring, "This will not stop what God has already set in motion." January 20th also marks the end of negotiating with doubt. Doubt had a voice during the delay, but it does not get a vote in the next season. God is not offended by doubt, but He does not partner with it. Trust is the language of alignment. As you cross this line, your language must change, not just what you say out loud, but what you agree with internally. Heaven is not watching to see if you cross perfectly. It is watching to see if you cross willingly. Stumbling forward still counts as movement. God is not measuring your confidence. He is measuring your obedience. and obedience activates covering. As this part closes, understand this. January 20th is not something happening to you. It is something happening with you. God is inviting your participation. This line in the sand is not meant to threaten you. It is meant to free you. What stays behind no longer defines you. What lies ahead is not delayed. It is ready. And you are being called to step into it with trust, clarity, and resolve. There are cycles that refuse to break no matter how much effort you apply, and those cycles can quietly convince you that repetition is your destiny. Archangel Michael reveals that many of the delays you experienced were not isolated events, but patterns, loops that replayed with different faces but the same outcome. You tried to change strategies, environments, and even expectations, yet the result felt familiar every time. That repetition was not coincidence. It was a cycle demanding confrontation, not adjustment. And now, God is ending it. Cycles persist because they are sustained by agreement. Sometimes that agreement is conscious, but more often it is subtle. It hides in thoughts like "this always happens" or "this is just how things go for me." Over time, those thoughts become internal laws, shaping expectation and response. God is not angry with you for forming them. You formed them to survive disappointment. But survival thinking cannot coexist with breakthrough living. That is why this season feels confrontational, not outwardly, but internally. God is challenging the narratives that kept cycles alive. Archangel Michael says this time is different because the authority being released is different. In previous seasons, you were learning, enduring, and being refined. Now, you are being authorized. Authorization changes how cycles respond to you. What once repeated without resistance now encounters boundaries. What once drained you now meets limits. This is not because you suddenly became stronger, but because alignment has shifted. Heaven is backing your forward movement with enforcement. Breaking cycles requires more than desire. It requires discernment. You must recognize when something familiar is no longer permitted. Familiarity often disguises itself as comfort, even when it produces pain. You learned how to manage certain disappointments. You learned how to adjust emotionally. But God is removing the need for constant adjustment by removing the source. The cycle does not end because you cope better. It ends because it loses access. There is also grief involved in cycle breaking. That may sound surprising, but cycles, even painful ones, become part of your identity over time. Letting them go can feel like losing a piece of yourself. You may ask, who am I without this struggle? God welcomes that question. He is not just removing the cycle. He is redefining you beyond it. What you are stepping into requires a new self-perception, one not shaped by repetition or disappointment. Archangel Michael emphasizes that this breaking is not partial. God is not trimming the cycle. He is uprooting it. Partial freedom often leads to repeated battles. Complete freedom establishes new ground. That is why this season may feel intense. Uprooting always disturbs the soil. But disturbance is temporary. Freedom is lasting. You may notice that familiar triggers are losing their power. Things that once sent you into anxiety or discouragement no longer hold the same weight. That is a sign the cycle is weakening. Do not reattach meaning to what God is removing. When old patterns try to resurface, do not engage them emotionally. Recognition without participation accelerates their end. Breaking cycles also shifts your authority in future challenges. Once a cycle is broken, it cannot use the same strategy again. You gain discernment that remains with you. You recognize patterns sooner. You respond differently. That wisdom becomes part of your spiritual foundation. God never wastes what you endure. Even cycles become teachers before they become testimonies. This season also calls you out of survival mode. Survival mode focuses on getting through. Alignment focuses on moving forward. Survival asks, how do I endure this? Alignment asks, where is God taking me? You cannot ask both questions at the same time. God is inviting you to release survival thinking because it limits vision. Vision requires freedom from constant defense. Cycles often kept you reactive. You responded to problems as they appeared. Breaking cycles allows you to become proactive. You move with intention instead of reaction. The shift changes your pace. You are no longer rushing to fix problems. You are positioning to build. That is a profound change. Archangel Michael also reveals that some cycles were generational. Patterns you didn't choose but inherited. Those patterns lose power when confronted by alignment and trust. You are not responsible for how they started, but you are positioned to end them. That is not pressure. It is honor. Ending a cycle creates space not just for you, but for those connected to you. As this part closes, receive this truth without hesitation. Cycles that refuse to break before will not survive this season. Not because you fought harder, but because God has declared their end. You are stepping out of repetition and into alignment. The ground beneath you is changing, and once you move forward, there will be no need to look back at what no longer has permission to follow. Heaven responds to trust in ways the human mind cannot predict. Archangel Michael reveals that trust is not merely an emotional posture, it is a spiritual signal. When you choose trust, especially after delay, disappointment, and confusion, something shifts immediately in the unseen realm. Movement begins where there was stillness. Authorization is released where resistance once lingered. Trust tells heaven that you are aligned, ready, and willing to receive what has already been prepared. For a long time, you may have believed that obedience was the main requirement for breakthrough. Obedience matters, but trust goes deeper. You can obey outwardly while remaining guarded inwardly. Trust removes that guard. It opens access. It allows heaven to move without obstruction. Archangel Michael says that many blessings remain paused not because God is unwilling, but because trust has not yet been fully chosen. Once it is, response is immediate. This is why even a quiet, internal decision carries such weight. You do not need to announce your trust publicly for it to matter. Heaven hears internal alignment. Angels respond to agreement, not volume. The moment you decided, even silently, I will trust God with this, something changed. The atmosphere around you shifted. Resistance lost leverage. Momentum began to build. Trust also simplifies spiritual movement. Complicated emotions, overanalysis, and constant questioning slow alignment. Trust clears the path. It allows divine order to flow without interference. That does not mean challenges disappear instantly, but it does mean they no longer control direction. You move forward with stability, not urgency. Confidence replaces tension. Archangel Michael emphasizes that obedience fueled by trust activates angelic assignment. Angels move when there is clarity of authority. Trust signals that clarity. It tells heaven that you are not double-minded, not hesitating between fear and faith. You are aligned, and alignment authorizes action. This is why things may begin to shift suddenly once trust is chosen. It can feel surprising, even overwhelming, but it is the result of delayed movement now released. There is also healing in this response. Trust heals the internal fractures caused by waiting. It restores peace where anxiety settled. It allows joy to return without suspicion. Many people fear joy because past joy was followed by disappointment. Trust breaks that association. It allows you to experience peace without bracing for loss. You may notice that as trust deepens, clarity follows. Decisions become easier. Discernment sharpens. You are less reactive and more intentional. That is not coincidence. Trust quiets noise. When fear steps back, wisdom steps forward. God's voice becomes easier to recognize when trust removes competing narratives. This season also reveals how trust attracts support, not just spiritual but relational. As alignment increases, the right people recognize you. Opportunities align naturally. Conversations open doors. This is not manipulation. It is orchestration. God arranges support systems around those who trust Him because trust positions you to receive help without control. Archangel Michael also reveals that trust is the language heaven uses to measure readiness. Readiness is not about perfection or strength. It is about willingness. When you trust, you signal willingness to move even if the path is not fully revealed. That willingness matters more than certainty. God does not require you to see the entire journey, only to take the next step. There is also protection released through trust. Fear attracts interference. Trust attracts covering. When you trust God, you step under His authority rather than trying to manage outcomes yourself. That authority shields you. It does not remove challenges, but it governs them. Challenges are filtered. They no longer overwhelm. You may feel moments of hesitation even now. That does not disqualify you. Trust is not the absence of hesitation. It is the decision to move despite it. Every time you choose trust again, alignment strengthens. Think of trust as a posture you return to, not a state you maintain perfectly. As this part nears its close, understand this. Heaven hath been waiting for your trust not to test you, but to respond to you. The response is already underway. What unfolds next builds on this decision. You'll be glad you stayed for what's about to be revealed. Type "I choose trust" in the comments if this message aligns with your spirit. Lesson code 638 is now activated. As you choose trust and feel heaven responding, hear this as part of the same divine moment. God is using this word to reach hearts that are still on the edge of surrender, still waiting for confirmation. I am personally inviting you right now to partner with what God is doing through this message. The word declares that those who sow into good ground will reap in due season, and this is living ground bearing fruit across nations. When you give through Super Thanks, channel membership, or the PayPal link in the description, or the PayPal QR code on screen, you are lighting lamps in dark places. I speak blessing over every giver, that the trust you release becomes a harvest of peace, provision, and acceleration in your life. Do not delay obedience. Release the seed. Let heaven respond. Your response in this season is not optional. It is catalytic. Archangel Michael reveals that acceleration is unlocked when alignment becomes visible through action. Heaven has already initiated movement behind the scenes, but the pace at which things unfold now is connected to how you respond. This is not about forcing doors or creating pressure. It is about cooperating with what God has already authorized. When alignment meets response, momentum increases naturally. Many people confuse faith with waiting alone. Waiting has its place, but waiting without response can quietly turn into passivity. God honors patience, yet He responds to agreement. Agreement is not just internal belief. It is expressed through choices, words, and direction. Right now, Heaven is not asking you to prove anything. It is syncing with you. Acceleration requires rhythm. God moves, you respond. You respond, God advances the next step. This rhythm keeps momentum steady and sustainable. There is a narrow window opening where small, aligned actions carry amplified impact. Decisions that once felt heavy will now feel clear. Steps that once required great effort will now respond to simple obedience. This is how acceleration works. It compresses time and multiplies effect. But acceleration cannot carry indecision. Indecision creates drag. Trust expressed through action removes that drag and clears the path forward. Your response does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be aligned. Speak differently about your future. Stop rehearsing outcomes rooted in past delays. Decide differently when fear suggests waiting longer. Move forward in areas where hesitation once felt safer. These responses are not random behaviors. They are signals. They tell heaven that you are ready to steward what is coming. God does not accelerate those who are still negotiating with yesterday. Archangel Michael emphasizes that some answers are already in motion, but arrival depends on positioning. Positioning begins internally before it ever appears externally. When your mindset shifts, your environment responds. When your language aligns with trust, opportunities recognize it. This is why your response matters so deeply. You are not persuading God, you are aligning with Him. Community agreement also plays a role here. Acceleration is often sustained through shared alignment. When you engage with this message, by liking it, sharing it, or commenting, you are not merely interacting with content. You are participating in agreement. You are adding your voice to a collective response that strengthens reach and reinforces momentum for others who are still questioning whether God is moving. If this word is resonating with you, act on it. Like this video so it reaches someone who is still wondering if their delay has an expiration date. Share it with a person who needs reassurance that God has not overlooked them. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do so now. What is being released here is not meant to inspire you once and disappear. It is meant to walk with you through this shift with clarity and consistency. Your engagement matters more than you realize. Acceleration also demands discernment. Not every opportunity is yours, even in a season of movement. Trust sharpens discernment. Fear blurs it. As things begin to move faster, stay grounded. Do not confuse speed with direction. God accelerates purposefully. He does not scatter. If something pulls you away from peace, clarity, or alignment, pause. True acceleration feels steady, not frantic. You may notice resistance attempting to reappear as acceleration increases. A resistance often disguises itself as distraction, busyness, or second-guessing. Do not interpret resistance as a sign you are wrong. Often, it is confirmation that you are moving correctly. Stay focused. Stay aligned. Stay responsive. Momentum grows where attention is protected. Your response also includes rest. Acceleration does not mean exhaustion. God does not hurry you into burnout. He accelerates outcomes, not pressure. If you feel rushed internally, check alignment. True acceleration carries peace even when movement increases. Trust allows you to move quickly without panic. Consistency matters more than intensity here. One aligned step repeated faithfully carries more authority than sporadic bursts of effort. You do not need to overhaul your life overnight. You need to remain responsive daily. That consistency builds momentum without strain and keeps you aligned as new doors open. Release comparison in this season. Acceleration will look different for each person. Some will see immediate external change. Others, will experience internal shifts before visible results appear. Both are valid. Do not measure your progress by someone else's pace. God's timing is personal. Your response is the measure that matters. As this part closes, hear this clearly. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not catching up. You are responding right on time. Acceleration is not about moving faster. It is about moving aligned. Stay present with this message, because what comes next completes what has been forming beneath the surface. You will want to hear what is about to be revealed. When God releases a reversal, He does not move according to human impatience or surface-level expectations. Archangel Michael reveals that restoration follows divine order, not emotional urgency. Many people assume that the first sign of breakthrough will be something visible: money, opportunity, recognition, or sudden change. But God often begins where the damage was deepest and least visible. He restores inwardly before He restores upwardly. What He reverses first is not always what you lost externally, but what was slowly worn down internally during the delay. For many of you, the first reversal will be the return of peace. Not circumstantial peace, but internal peace. During the delay, anxiety may have become familiar. You learned how to live with uncertainty, how to function while carrying tension, how to keep going while feeling unsettled. That constant low-level stress became normal. God removes that first. You may notice a calm settling into places that were always restless. Thoughts slow down. Your nervous system relaxes. You stop bracing for disappointment. This peace is not a reward. It is preparation. Without peace, acceleration would overwhelm you. After peace, God restores clarity. Delay clouds perception. Over time, you may have struggled to discern direction clearly. Every option felt risky. Every decision felt heavy. God restores your ability to see again, not just opportunities, but truth. You begin to recognize what matters and what doesn't. Confusion lifts. Discernment sharpens. You no longer feel stuck between choices. Clarity is restored because clarity is necessary for movement. God does not accelerate confusion. Next, God restores confidence. Not arrogance, not self-reliance, but quiet confidence rooted in alignment. Delay often attacks confidence subtly. You begin questioning your judgment, your timing, your ability to hear God. Even when you made good decisions, you second-guessed them. God heals that fracture. You begin trusting yourself again because you are trusting Him again. Confidence returns as a byproduct of restored trust. Archangel Michael explains that emotional healing is also part of the first wave of reversal. Waiting wins quietly. Disappointment compounds. Hope is managed carefully to avoid pain. God does not ignore that damage. He addresses it directly. You may feel lighter without knowing why. Old emotional triggers lose their power. Situations that once drained you emotionally no longer affect you the same way. This healing is not dramatic, but it is real, and it creates space for joy to return. Joy is another early sign of restoration. Not loud excitement, but grounded joy. A joy that does not depend on circumstances changing overnight. A joy that feels steady instead of fragile. This joy strengthens you for transition. It reminds you that your identity is not tied to struggle, waiting, or endurance. Joy returns to recalibrate your spirit for what is coming next. God also restores vision before provision. During delay, vision often narrows. You stop dreaming broadly and start thinking practically. You focus on survival rather than expansion. God widens your vision again. You begin imagining a future without immediately dismissing it. You allow yourself to think beyond limitation. Vision is restored because vision directs movement. Without vision, provision has nowhere to go. Another critical reversal happens in how you interpret your past. Delay can write your story in painful ways. You may have started viewing waiting as failure, silence as rejection, or delay as disqualification. God corrects that narrative. He restores truth. You begin seeing waiting as preparation, silence as protection, and delay as alignment. That shift removes shame. Shame often accumulates quietly during prolonged waiting. God releases it deliberately. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You were not less capable. That truth restores dignity. Only after these internal restorations does God begin accelerating external change. Opportunities begin aligning. Conversations open doors. Resources appear. Timing shifts. What once required relentless effort now responds to alignment. This order is intentional. External acceleration without internal restoration would create pressure, instability, and fear. God restores you first so that what He gives can be sustained. Relationships are also addressed early in the reversal process. Delay often isolates people emotionally. You may have withdrawn or others may have drifted away. God realigns relationships strategically. Some connections strengthen naturally. Others fade without conflict. This is not loss, it is positioning. God restores relational support that aligns with your next season, not your last struggle. Archangel Michael also reveals that God restores authority early. Authority was challenged during the delay. You may have felt powerless, dependent on circumstances beyond your control. God restores your sense of agency. You begin making decisions without paralysis. You act with discernment instead of fear. This authority is not dominance. It is confidence in partnership with God. Patience is still required, but it changes in nature. This patience is no longer defensive or resigned. It is expectant. You are not waiting for disappointment. You are preparing for fulfillment. That shift changes how time feels. Waiting becomes purposeful instead of heavy. You no longer feel stuck. You feel positioned. As this part closes, receive this clearly. What God restores first is what delay tried hardest to damage. Peace before progress. Clarity before expansion. Confidence before opportunity. Vision before provision. This order is deliberate, protective, and loving. Do not overlook these internal shifts. They are not secondary signs. They are primary evidence that reversal is already underway. There is a warning woven into this message, and it is spoken with urgency, not fear. Archangel Michael makes it clear that what God is unfolding right now is time-sensitive. This does not mean God is impatient or unpredictable. It means this moment carries a specific purpose, and that purpose has a window. Windows are merciful because they open access, but they are also decisive because they do not remain open indefinitely. This is why discernment matters so deeply right now. Many people miss divine shifts not because they reject God, but because they delay response. Delay feels safer than decision. It gives the illusion of control. But hesitation in a season of movement can quietly close doors that obedience would have opened. Archangel Michael is not warning you of punishment. He is warning you of misalignment. There is a difference. God does not withdraw love, but opportunities tied to timing can pass if not received. This warning is gentle but firm. Do not assume you can engage later what God is inviting you into now. Trust deferred becomes doubt. Alignment postponed becomes resistance. The longer you wait to respond, the easier it becomes to rationalize staying where you are. Familiarity has a strong pull, especially after long seasons of delay. But familiarity is not safety. It is simply what you know. God's mercy has carried you to this point. His patience has sustained you through waiting. But patience does not cancel timing. It supports it. There are moments when patience gives way to action. This is one of those moments. January 20th marks a turning point, but the posture you carry into it matters. Windows are entered, not observed. Archangel Michael reveals that some people will hear this message and feel the nudge to trust, but choose to wait for more confirmation. That choice feels wise, but it can be costly. God often confirms after obedience, not before. Waiting for certainty can result in stagnation. Faith does not require recklessness, but it does require response. The warning is not act blindly, but do not stay passive. Another danger in this window is over-spiritualizing delay. You may tell yourself you are being patient, when in reality you are avoiding risk. You may call hesitation wisdom, when it is actually fear dressed as caution. God sees the heart. He knows the difference. Archangel Michael calls this out not to accuse you, but to free you. Awareness breaks cycles. Truth restores alignment. This window also tests priorities. When God shifts seasons, distractions often increase. Old obligations demand attention. New pressures arise. You may feel pulled in multiple directions. This is not coincidence. It is competition for focus. What you prioritize in this window determines what you carry forward. Do not let urgency from the world drown out instruction from heaven. There is also a warning about nostalgia. Looking back too often can anchor you to what God is asking you to release. You may feel tempted to measure the future by past disappointments. That comparison is dangerous in a season of transition. The past is not your reference point anymore. God is doing something new, and it cannot be evaluated through old outcomes. Archangel Michael emphasizes that obedience delayed can become obedience denied. Not because God rejects you, but because momentum shifts. Some doors require you to step through while they are open. They do not chase you. God is gracious, but He is also purposeful. This is not meant to scare you. It is meant to sharpen you. You may feel resistance rising as you hear this warning. A part of you may want to dismiss it, to believe there will always be another chance. While God is always loving, seasons are not repeated endlessly. Certain alignments happen once. Certain intersections of preparation and timing are unique. Missing them does not end your relationship with God, but it can delay fulfillment longer than necessary. This warning is also an invitation. God would not alert you to timing if He did not want you to succeed. Heaven speaks because heaven cares. Archangel Michael's tone is protective, not threatening. He is guarding what God has prepared by calling you to attention. Do not underestimate the power of small decisions in this window. You do not need to change everything overnight. You need to stay responsive. You need to choose trust again when doubt whispers. You need to act when alignment nudges. These small responses keep you within the flow of what God is unfolding. As this part closes, receive this warning with clarity, not fear. God is not rushing you, but He is calling you forward. Do not miss this window by assuming it will wait for you. Step with trust. Move with discernment. Respond with obedience. What God is releasing is worth your attention, your courage, and your yes, now, not later. As this message reaches its close, it does not end in uncertainty, it ends in assurance. Archangel Michael speaks not only of warning and alignment, but of comfort, completion, and divine covering. Everything you have heard was not meant to overwhelm you, but to steady you. God is not stirring fear. He is restoring confidence. The shift unfolding is not fragile. It is deliberate, anchored, and backed by heaven. What God has initiated will not collapse because you are not walking into it alone. This is the moment where the weight lifts and clarity settles. You are not standing on unstable ground. You are standing on answered preparation. Every delay, every test of trust, every quiet season where nothing seemed to move was shaping you for this exact crossing. God did not rush the process because what He is releasing requires depth, not just desire. And now that depth hath been formed, the assurance here is simple and powerful. God has not forgotten you, bypassed you, or replaced you. What was promised still stands. What was delayed was not denied. Heaven kept record of your faithfulness when no one else saw it. Tears were counted. Gratitude heard. Waiting was not wasted. And now, the season of response has arrived. You are stepping into a phase where peace walks with progress, where clarity accompanies opportunity, where trust no longer feels like risk, but like rest. This does not mean challenges disappear forever, but it does mean you face them differently. You are no longer surviving. You are aligned. You are no longer bracing. You are building. You are no longer asking if God will move. You are responding because He already is. Archangel Michael assures you that protection surrounds what God is restoring. What tried to delay you will not regain access. Old cycles do not have permission to follow you forward. Familiar resistance loses authority when alignment is complete. You are not walking into exposure. You are walking under covering. Heaven stands guard over what God has prepared for you. There is also joy released here. Not excitement rooted in outcome, but joy rooted in trust. A joy that steadies you regardless of pace. A joy that reminds you who you belong to. This joy is strength. It will carry you through transition without exhaustion. It will remind you that God's presence is not tied to performance, but to relationship. As this journey continues beyond this message, remember that trust remains your anchor. You do not need to strive to maintain what God sustains. You do not need to prove yourself in what God has authorized. Stay responsive. Stay grounded. Stay willing. That posture keeps you aligned long after the moment passes. This message closes, but the movement does not. What God is unfolding will continue to reveal itself step by step. You will recognize confirmation in unexpected ways. You will notice doors opening without force. You will feel peace where fear once spoke. These are signs of alignment, not coincidence. Now receive this final blessing as you step forward. Type "I walk in alignment" in the comments if you receive this word. Blessing code 842 is now activated over your life. As this word settles and you step into what God is unfolding, hear this as a final act of obedience, not a request. God is using this message to reach souls who are still waiting for hope, still searching for confirmation, still standing at the edge of trust. I am speaking directly to you now. This is your moment to sow into what God is breathing on. Scripture declares that those who give in faith unlock open heavens, and God is speaking that promise personally over your seed. When you support through Super Thanks, channel membership, or the PayPal donation link in the description, or the PayPal QR code on screen, you are releasing light, truth, and direction to those who need it most. I bless every giver now, that what you release returns as peace, provision, and divine acceleration. Do not hesitate. Obey the prompting. Release the seed. Heaven is watching and responding.